welcome to the Animal Training Academy Making Ripples podcast show, the show where we share the stories of the ripple-making extraordinaires with behavior nerd superpowers who make up the Animal Training Academy membership. I'm your host and one of the happiness engineers at Animal Training Academy, Shelley Wood from Drop Your Jaws Dog Training in Cape Girardeau, Missouri in the United States. We're absolutely thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today. Make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss a single episode. This show is brought to you on behalf of the Animal Training Academy membership. So if you like the conversations in these episodes, then we want to invite you to continue them with like-minded people in the ATA membership, which you can find out more about at www.atamember.com. Within the membership, you can get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalog of previous web class replays, plus a huge library of videos and projects to help you problem solve your training challenges. And we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group and forums area. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behavior geeks. Today, we welcome Sara Crockett to the show. Sara holds a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from Central Michigan University. Beginning her career as a service dog trainer, Sara became passionate about using up-to-date, least intrusive training methods centered on the science of behavior. Her passion for kind and ethical teaching fuels her approach to teaching all species, and that extends to human learners. Sara is dedicated to raising her son and daughter with kind and thoughtful approaches supported by science, from teaching first words to cooperative care for vaccines and teeth brushing. Sara created Contingent on Kindness Behavior Consulting as a platform to inspire others by sharing information about the science of behavior and learning, and works privately with clients. Sara and her family share their home and land with 2 dogs, a cat, a horse, and a pony. When Sara's not teaching or training, she enjoys spending time with her family, sewing, interior styling, and making music. Sara recently launched a video series in collaboration with Laura Perkins Animal Behavior to help make learning about the science of behavior more accessible to clients, parents, and others who influence behavior. They have plans to turn this series into a podcast. Sara, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm pumped to be here.
You're welcome. I am pumped to have you here. And I think our audience is going to be pumped as well to listen to all the great things that you have to share today. So I'm super excited to get this conversation going today. And knowing you a bit as I do, and then having a chance to catch up with you before the show today, I think it's safe to say that you wear your behavior glasses most of the time. We like to start out on this show by asking guests to share a little bit with us about some of maybe their life outside of what some people might consider typical quote-unquote animal training, and how their animal training influences that life, and then also how that life maybe influences their animal training as well. So I'm hoping that you could start us out a little bit by talking about that overlap today and maybe sharing a story or two about times that you've seen influences from the animal training world in part of your life that most wouldn't think of as related to animal training.
Oh, that is such a hard question for me, because it's like you said, it's really hard to take the behavior glasses off. And there really is such an overlap, I think, in every aspect of my life with concepts related to training and behavior. Because we're all humans and we're all behaving all the time, and everything we do involves behavior. So I've struggled to even think of examples where I can't tie them together since we talked last weekend. So I would say examples where there's definitely overlap. So first of all, like you mentioned in the intro, raising our son so far, there's so many areas where there's overlap between teaching an animal husbandry behavior skills and teaching a child. But then thinking back to hobbies that I do outside of training, I like to play guitar and sing. And, even there, I think of the overlap with the concept of errorless learning and mastering different chords, and the way that I've built basically the skills of being able to play and sing since I was probably starting dance classes as a 3 or 4-year-old, because that was teaching rhythm, at that age. And then later I did singing, and I've done voice lessons, and I was singing for a band at one point, and I used to sing with the band and like strum the rhythm of the rhythm guitar, like on my leg, like while I was singing. And I realized once you put the guitar in my hand and you start learning the chords, it all came together pretty quickly to put the singing with the playing. And that I just feel like is such a good example of how we build as trainers and modifiers of behavior. We build skills one at a time, like one layer at a time. And with the concept of tag teach too, which probably a lot of listeners are familiar with, one skill at a time and put it all together. So I think that's a good example of some overlap as well. And just hobbies like gardening or sewing, it's the same too, where we want to set ourselves up for success, just like we want to set our learners up for success so that we don't get frustrated and give up. We want to use successive approximations. We want to have our materials ready to go. So yeah, it's hard to separate the two. I was even thinking like when I write an email to somebody, or one example recently was I got a thing off of Etsy, and it wasn't made out of the material that the listing said it was going to be made out of. The product was great, and I wasn't upset about it. It was just kind of strange that it wasn't what it said it was going to be. And when I wrote the message to the seller to ask about it, I wasn't confrontational. I wasn't trying to sound upset. I actually complimented the item and said, thanks for being so helpful. Here's what happened, and I'm just curious, what do you think? So you're giving choice, and, we're always, I think a lot of us are always thinking in terms of creating the outcomes that we want, and thinking about how we are influencing the other person or the learner. And it's really hard to think of examples where I'm not doing that. And the most recent example that came to mind over the last week, where I was just trying to look for like, okay, am I not thinking about behavior right now? I was working on one of Cecil's puzzles with him, and I had this piece in my hand, and I could not figure out where it went. And it was a black and white puzzle that you color, so it wasn't colored yet, which made it even trickier. And finally, I turned the piece, and it made perfect sense where it went. And I was like, oh, I was looking at the puzzle piece upside down. And I thought, again, I was like, that is I could draw such an analogy there with behavior and training. And especially when there's an unwanted behavior or behavior we want to change, of how sometimes it's always like a puzzle. And sometimes we're looking at a puzzle piece completely upside down, and it's like it fits in there somewhere, but we just can't figure out how. So I thought that was a cool example too.
Those are all great examples, Sara. Thank you so much for sharing those with us. I know you just kind of briefly mentioned the puzzle story to me earlier, but then listening to you share it here again right now, I was also struck by what I call a Ryanism. Ryan Cartledge, the founder of ATA, he frequently says something, and I'm sure I'm going to get it a little bit wrong here, but it's something to the effect of, and he says this kind of, when looking at an animal training related problem, if I could change one thing, no matter how small and insignificant that one thing might be, what might I change? And that popped into my mind this time as you were telling that puzzle story, because if you've got puzzle pieces all in front of you and you just flip one piece over, that doesn't seem like a really big, significant change necessarily, but by doing that, it's changed your whole perspective and allowed you to start putting that puzzle into place, which is very similar to the way that animal training works sometimes.
I was going to say, speaking of Ryan, just on the note of the overlap and everything affects everything, really, I did have an example I wanted to share just really to thank Ryan, but on ATA, on the members only page, a couple of years ago now, almost, I had posted a video for some feedback, and I explained how the dog I was working with, I think I worded it as like, was getting distracted or something like that when the client would go to her garage, which is actually where she stores the dog's food. And I was like, he loses interest in the training with me that we're doing, and like kind of sniffs over in that direction, is kind of staring toward the garage door when she goes out there. I don't know what I was looking for. I was just mentioning, probably I was explaining what was happening in the video. And what Ryan said back made such a huge impact on how I look at everything now. And he said something along the lines of, oh, it sounds like the client going to the garage is cueing a different behavior, or it's cueing, like that cue is, there's a cue there that's cueing that. And it was just like, oh my gosh. Like before that, I think I had looked at training and creating behavior like very contextually, kind of as an isolated, like we're in a session, he's getting distracted, like what do I do about this? And then that was like the moment for me with that comment from Ryan where I realized that it's all the same thing. Like it's all in the same universe and it's all behavior. And so now I just, with every behavior, I'm like, well, what's cueing it? There's always a cue. And I think that helps with the concept of not learner blaming. So I just really, it was a little thing, but it was a huge light bulb for me.
That's a really great story. Thank you for sharing that one with us too. And yeah, sometimes those little things are the really big things that really shape our perspective, aren't they? So what a great example of that. When you were talking about some of the other ways that you see kind of training and behavior, your experience in the training and behavior world impacting your life outside of that, whatever that means, because I think that you and I both kind of share the same thought that, like you just said, it's all happening in the same universe, right? But you mentioned, I'm thinking about the story you mentioned when you were talking to the woman from Etsy about needing to return this item and how you set that all up and communicated with her in a way that you, I think, if I'm understanding correctly, were able to develop that skill set maybe because of some of your animal training and behavior work. I'm wondering if you find that you use those skills to help you in communication with other people that maybe help serve you and your family, or maybe help serve you and your clients so that everybody can get their needs met in the best way possible. Is that question making sense to you?
I think so. Do you kind of mean like, is it possible that I use basically what we might call the crucial conversation skills in how I would approach talking to like another caretaker or?
Sure. Crucial conversation skills, or just anything that you've learned from animal training. So, for instance, when you were talking about the conversation with the lady from Etsy, you talked about kind of trying to use an errorless learning approach, I think, and setting the situation up to give her choice as well. And I'm kind of wondering specifically maybe with your clients, if there are relationships you have with other people sometimes, maybe other trainers who they have worked with, or maybe veterinarians, or if you use those communication skills that you've kind of developed as a result of your animal training skills, maybe to help achieve positive outcomes for everyone. Is that a better way of wording it, maybe?
I think I follow you. Yeah. And I think, yeah, that's so important. Those concepts, I think, yeah, if we want the best outcome for the dog, I think we need to be really thoughtful and considerate in how we view our clients and how we talk to them and how we propose ideas. I've noticed that to be, I think, even more true with other parents. I think we've come a long way with animal training and giving feedback overall, to where we tend to not, I think clients in general too, tend to not take so much personally. But I think with your child, it's even harder for parents. At least that's what I've kind of gathered, is it is like a personal thing, like to people. Like I think with ATA, with what we do in our circles of colleagues, we're also used to like throwing our videos out there and our ideas out there and being like, tell me what to do different, or like, tell me what I'm doing wrong and make me better. And I think that with the parenting world, at least from what I've learned and experienced, it's different. It's more touchy, it's sensitive, and understandably so, for parents, because this isn't their life. Like what we do, like we're weird. Like we're the weird ones that we do this all day long, every day. So I think we're pretty desensitized to feeling like anything is personal or super personal, and we're really objective. But I think that we need to be careful with how we approach things. And it's the crucial conversation concept of, do I want to be right, or do I want to make an influence? Do I want to have an influence here and make a positive change? And so we have to, even if we have to bite your tongue and start sometimes with like baby steps, I think that is going to go further than approaching something in a more kind of forceful way. So yeah, I think we approach all of our learners, we want to approach with that same perspective of being gentle and kind and thoughtful of their perspective and where they're coming from. And I think that is really important. And I think for like, if it's a babysitter I'm talking to, or a doctor or a veterinarian, I think it is really important in addition to the crucial conversation type skills, and wanting kind of to approach it from, okay, what's our goal collectively here? I think additionally, how we treat them can affect, it's an antecedent for how they're going to approach our animal or our child and how they're going to treat them. So I think it's really important, even if you can be a good advocate for your learner and still be gentle with the people you're advocating with, if that makes sense. I think that's really important.
It makes total sense. And I would agree that those skills are really important when we're communicating with other people. And like you said, I think that's really interesting. That's something that I really wasn't thinking about. But like you said, we tend to be really good at doing it when we are doing it with other animal trainers, other people who we're used to communicating in this way with, and have kind of built this culture with. But sometimes when you step outside of that culture, it can be really challenging. I would agree with that. And so thanks for pointing that out. A couple other things that stood out to me in your bio here before we move on to our next couple of questions. But I was curious if you could talk a little bit about your interest in, your skills with interior styling, and what it is about interior styling that you really enjoy. What is it about that you like? And just share a little bit about that experience with us.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, it's a creative outlet. But I think that training and behavior has become that as well, just like the music and sewing. I think they all kind of serve a similar function, actually, thinking about it a little more deeply, with interior styling. So I think, man, I'm relating it to behavior, but it's an antecedent for when someone walks into your home, or you yourself walks into your home or a room in your home, how does it feel and how does it make you feel? And what kind of feeling do you want to get from being in that space? And that comes back to behavior too. But it also is like a puzzle. So it's, there's some like basic rules that you can follow for aesthetics and to make something pleasing to look at. But then the rest of it is kind of up to your creativity and your personal style. And so I like that it's a puzzle. And I like that you gradually work on putting an outcome together, just like with behavior. It's an outcome thing, right? All of these things, it's like building up building something and then getting this outcome that you'll see at the end. And it's so reinforcing to me. So I do think that it's a similar, oddly enough, it's similar, but different too.
I think it's totally similar. And I'm glad that you mentioned the idea of kind of antecedent arrangements, is all what interior styling is all about, or a big piece of what it's all about, because that's definitely how I would view it. I don't know if you've ever seen this video. I think I might have seen it first, maybe, and I could be wrong, but I might have seen it at a LLA seminar Dr. Friedman did in Chicago. She may have showed this video. I could be wrong, though. I know I have a coworker who used to show it frequently, but there was somewhere people were trying to get, like the city or the government or someone was trying to encourage people to take the stairs more instead of riding an elevator. And so they turned the stairs into basically like piano keys. So if you walked up the stairs, you would be playing music, which encouraged a lot more people to start going up the stairs because it was pleasing to them, reinforcing to play that music. And just a cool example, I think. Have you seen that video?
I haven't, but that's the other piece I was going to add with the interior styling. Yeah, it's how you use the space and how the space is cueing different behaviors from the people occupying it. So like if you have hooks right here and a little rug right here, it's very likely that someone will think to hang their coat there and to leave their shoes there. And so you're looking at the different functions or potential functions for the spaces and how you want people to be cued, basically, how you want to cue their behavior. Yeah, so that's awesome. That's a great example with the stairs. That's really cool.
Yeah, and good examples about, where you place a rug and hooks and those type of things. Do you do a lot of that in your own home? Try to cue your family to do desired behaviors by where you place certain design objects, maybe?
So let me think. I think it's a work in progress with this house. And sometimes we forget how much we've done, and my husband will remind me and send me this like massive long list of things that we've done, which is so nice because I think I'm really hard on myself and I forget. But yeah, I would say I do for sure, and not from a aesthetic standpoint, but for antecedent arrangement standpoint for sure. I laugh because I like literally put Cecil's toothbrush and toothpaste in a specific spot as an antecedent for both of us so that I don't forget about it and that it's there if he chooses to grab it. And that's happened where it's his, he chooses to pick it up and let's do my teeth now. So I'm very strategic about where I place things for Cecil and how I set the environment up to create behaviors that I want to occur.
All right, great. Thank you. I think we could probably spend the entire time that we have together talking about all the ways that the animal training and behavior world is all over the place in our lives. But unless I'm missing, unless we have missed something that you really kind of want to touch on here, I think we'll go ahead and move on to our next question then, which I am really excited to hear about. I know you have several examples that you could give for both of these next two questions, but I would love to hear, Sara, if you're willing, that you would share with us a bit about a recent training-related challenge that you've experienced, how you kind of worked through that challenge with help from others or with learning history that you have, that, what kind of tools helped you to work through that challenge and some things that you learned from working through that challenge.
Yeah, this question makes me laugh because I feel like I could come up with an example of a challenge with every learner that is in my care. So it's hard to choose, but one that really stands out that I learned a lot from, and I think is a really awesome example of putting all these concepts together to create a desired outcome, would be about a year ago, we had a babysitter who was kind of new to our family. And on like their second or so visit, regretfully, Cecil he was like 2.5 or so. And he was watching a show while I was gone, and she was with him. And she came out from the kitchen, and I don't know why she did this. She was being silly, she said. And she said, "Boo," and scared him really bad. And I didn't know that it had happened. And, I got home and she went home. And that night he kept bringing it up and was telling me that babysitter said, "Boo," and scared me really bad. And I was like, oh no, like we're, trying to get more details out of him. And I learned he said something about like her being in the kitchen and him being in the living room. And I was like, oh geez. So, I texted her about it because I was curious, like, hey, do you know why Cecil keeps telling me this story that you said boo and scared him really bad? And she said, oh no, I feel so terrible about this and I'm so sorry. And I was being goofy and I wasn't thinking, and I ran out and I just said boo because I've done that with other kids and they think it's funny. And, so that's what happened. And so then he kept talking about it, even if, even though we tried to talk through it, it was definitely stuck in his memory and something that was bothering him. And so that, as an antecedent to her next arrival and my next departure, was a challenge for sure. So I did my best to talk ahead of time, and I took him with me to Target, to the dollar section, to pick out a prize, is what we called it, so that when I left, they would be able to go open the prize together. And so we talked about it and we got prepared. And that day, he seemed ready for her to show up. And I was holding him by the front door watching for her car. And she pulled in and he was kind of hysterical, which is not something I normally see unless it's like an intense fear thing. It's not a common occurrence. So he was definitely very scared and he was almost shaking when she walked in. So I was like, okay, like this is tough. So we worked through it because she kind of understood at that point our approach, and that, we're not going to invalidate his feelings. We're going to go the opposite way, and like his voice matters and his feelings are valid. And it's the most important thing to me. It's a priority. And so we worked through it. In the end, I was able to use a start button, basically. So consent from him, or, make it feel very choice-based for him. And he kind of warmed up and was sitting on the couch watching a show with her. And I said, okay, I'm going to go down the hall real quick, and then I'll come back and check on you guys. And so I was able to do that. So we got one successive approximation of me leaving. And then the thought popped into my head of saying, basically banking on our trust account and saying, when you're ready for me to leave, give me a thumbs up and you guys can go out to the kitchen and get your prize. And I basically said it and like crossed my fingers. And I just kind of waited, and he gave me a thumbs up, and I was like, okay, and I went and got my shoes on and got my coat on, and I heard him say like, bye, Mama Kitty, because he pretends we're cats all the time. And I was like, yes. So I was able to leave, and they had a great time. And she sent me pictures of them playing with the surprise that they went and opened. And then I think when I got back, even they were having so much fun that he just wanted to keep playing. So yeah, that is how we worked through that. And I was going to give that example to you. And then this actually, so we hadn't gone anywhere or had any date nights for about a year because of the pandemic, other than going to like some ultrasound appointments, but those were during the day and with a babysitter he knew really well that he adores. So those were no issue at all. But we had another occurrence on Friday night, actually, where it was a brand new babysitter who was awesome. And he was giving me lots of thumbs up and so excited. And then in the moment that I was putting on my shoes and my coat and kind of talking through like, yeah, I mean, you guys can do a bath or you don't have to. I think something happened right there because it was starting to get late. I think the cues were signaling, and then I mentioned bath, and I think right there maybe it was my mistake. I'm not sure. But I think that made him think about like bedtime, and like we were going to be back by then. But I think he didn't know that. And he got really sad and didn't want to let my leg go and was like begging me not to leave and like very sad. And he just was like, I want her to leave and I don't want you to leave. And I really, really love you and I don't want you to go. And I even said, I went into his room with him and was like, okay, let's go talk, not in front of her, just like, let's just go talk. And I even like bent down and was like, where do you think I'm going to go? And he was like, to heaven. And I was like, oh no. I was like, no, he's like, he was so sad. So, and I was like, really, really, I really wanted to get out. Like, even if it was just for a little bit to get takeout or something and come back. I was just like, I was so bummed inside, like, just because I was like, oh man, I really needed, like, just as much as we adore him and we love being with him and taking him places, it did sound good to just like go for a car ride with Steve and just have a conversation. So I was bummed inside and I was like, oh man, like, so I like went through all these options for like, potential reinforcers. Like, well, what if we blank? And what if I bring you back this? And what if? And he was getting more and more upset. And he was like, nothing will work. Nothing will work. And I was like, okay. So I finally realized like the more, we talk about it right now, the worse we're making it. And so what we ended up doing was going back out to the living room. And all of us were sitting on the couches and talking. And the babysitter started up a conversation with him that he was into. And then he warmed up and got down on the floor and was showing her his circuit board that he got for Christmas. And she has used circuit boards before. So she was all geeked about it. And I was like, I'll just fold some laundry since you're here. Like, I need to be getting stuff done. Like, if we're not leaving, like, I need to do laundry. So I sat there and folded laundry and they started having a blast together. And Steve was out in the kitchen. And then I said, or I didn't say anything. I made the choice. I'm going to go put some laundry away. So I left the room and he had no problem with that at all. So I was like, that's good. And at that point we were like, we're probably not going to leave. Like we had let go of that. But like, if we can just let them bond and build a reinforcement history with each other. Because, really at the time of us trying to leave, she was new. I mean, she'd been there for like an hour, but he doesn't know her that well yet. And they don't have they don't have a reinforcement history together. So when you compare that to the history he has with mom and dad, it's so similar. It's exactly the same really of like separation anxiety in an animal where, you closing a door, closing a gate and exiting, it's like loss of access to reinforcers. So how do we look at antecedents and how do we make other reinforcers available, so that they're content when we depart? It's so similar. So we did end up leaving. So they were having a great time and my husband actually got the idea of what if we mention that we'll go and we'll bring back his favorite, which is not something we do often, McDonald's, because that is his favorite thing. He was like, what if we just ask him, hey, what if we go and get you and Rachel some McDonald's and bring it back for you? And so I just very nonchalantly was like, hey, what do you think if we went and got you guys some McDonald's and brought it back? And then like Rachel could eat with us and have McDonald's. And he really liked that idea. And he just jumped on that idea and was like, oh, and I was like, yeah, ask Rachel what she wants. And he's like, Rachel, what do you want? And I was like, here, let me write it down. And I took their orders and he was like, this is really cool. He was like, hey, this will be really great practice for next time when you guys leave. And I was like, yes. So like Susan Friedman actually just a year ago at Expo gave a talk on how it's like the title is How to Like Your Kids While Raising Them or something like that. And something she really emphasizes in that talk is the importance and value in teaching your children how reinforcement works. So that's something that we've definitely done. So he'll like reinforce us for things, and basically anything we model, like it is reflected back from him. For example, like my husband putting up new closet doors 6 months ago or so, Cecil walked into the room and was like, "Wow, Dad, you worked so hard on these closet doors. They look awesome. High five." Like, stuff like that. I have a lot of examples of where he even like gave me an M&M and was like, "This is your reinforcer for not taking my popcorn." It was his very last M&M in the bottom of his popcorn bowl. And so he understands the concept there pretty well, actually, for a 3-year and 8-month-old. But yeah, so we went and they had a plan for what they were going to do while we were gone. He's like, "We're going to build marble runs while you're gone, and this will be good practice for next time." And we went, and she texted and was like, "We're having a blast, and we got the Play-Doh out now." And we came back, and he was great, and we all ate we just got we still went to, we still picked up food from the Mexican restaurant that I really love nearby. So I was happy too. And we ate our food together with her and talked, and like she's into robots and like she's building a robot. And so she's like a perfect fit. It actually just kind of felt like family. And we've known her family for a while, actually. But it was the first time we'd met her. But yeah, so we basically found where the answer was yes. And that caretaker, to me, she passed all my tests because she was super like non-judgmental, not pushy, and just went with the flow. And that's what I look for when I look at who I'm going to leave Cecil with. And it ended up like we had so much fun, and we hung out with somebody for like, probably one of the it felt like kind of normal again, you know what I mean? During these pandemic times. So we all had a great time. And I asked him a couple days later, "What helped you when you were having a hard time?" I try to remember to do things like that because it's weird and cool that he can tell me stuff when these things are happening. And it gives me even more empathy, actually, for our animals, because they can't say these things. They can't articulate, like, "I just love you so much and I don't want you to leave." and then I don't understand when you're actually going to be back, So yeah, it was, that was, I think, so cool. All the variables that went into that. And it wasn't that we failed and we scrapped the trial and gave up. And, we took the information, we saw his feelings as valid, and we started over basically and just kind of read him and the situation and found where we could be successful. And I think that was an awesome successive approximation. And what I was going to say is I asked him what helped, and he said that you stayed here and folded laundry, and Dad was in the kitchen. And I was like, "Oh, that helped. Okay." And those were, the antecedents were different that second attempt than the first. And that matters with the departure stuff. And even with my dog Lucy, I've noticed if someone's almost here and I'm rushing and I'm like, "Here, get in the bedroom," and I throw a Chewy in there and shut the door, she will not touch the Chewy, and she will get upset. And if I have time if I have notice and I can go in there with her first, and she'll lay down and I can pet her and then give her the Chewy, she'll start chewing on it. So she's got this other reinforcer that's actually gotten her interest. Then I can exit and she's not upset. It's so similar. It's the same concepts.
What beautiful stories, Sarah, from the first babysitter example to the most recent one, and then also the connections with separation anxiety and with your dog, Lucy. I'm so glad you shared all of that with us. Some things that really stuck out. Stuck is not a word, is it?
It can be.
Some things that really stood out to me. One thing that you already touched on too is how interesting it must be. I only work with, well, in my home, I only work with non-human animals. I work with some humans outside of my home pretty frequently. But when working with a little human learner, that added component of them having verbal skills, you know, how much more you might be able to, I'm laughing at the gesture, kind of a mind blown.
Mind blown.
Yeah. How much more you might be able to learn, and they might be able to learn with that, you know, with those verbal skills there. Do you think, I know that, you know, on that first question, and then it's coming up definitely here too, that kind of overlap between what we might traditionally think of as quote unquote animal training and the rest of our lives. You know, you've talked a lot about how your animal training kind of influences the rest of your life. But as you're telling these stories about working with Cecil and the babysitter and things, and you've made some connections for sure with your dog training as well. But I'm wondering, are there any like little nuggets or particular things that have kind of happened along the way in working with Cecil, whether it's with this particular challenge or whether it was with some other challenge that you were trying to help him learn something with, that gave you any kind of aha moments about particular things that you were working on with dogs or horses or any of the other animals in your life?
I'm sure the answer to that is yes. At the moment, what's coming to mind is so there's a book that Dr. Susan Friedman recommended before Cecil was even born. I was enrolled in her to start her LLA course, so I was going to be taking it when he was a month or two old, which worked, you know, because it's all virtual. But I asked her for some book recommendations, and one of the ones she gave me is called The Everyday Parenting Toolkit by Alan Cosden, and it's a fabulous book. And something he really emphasizes is that parents sometimes get kind of bogged down with, I guess that's the word, with thinking that everything is about consequences, whether punishment based or positive reinforcement based. And he talks a lot about antecedents and how, like, he uses the word compliance, which I don't love that word, but he's like, you can get a lot of compliance through antecedent arrangement and through your antecedents. And that's something that definitely is true. And I've seen how much that is true with animals as well. So I'm trying to think of how to summarize it, but for example, just like that situation with Cecil, where he was already worked up on Friday night, and no matter what I offered at that moment of being worked up, there was no other reinforcer like that would function as a reinforcer that could compete with the desired outcome of us not leaving in that moment. And I think that that's such a good lesson for animals too. I think maybe newer trainers or people who are wherever they are in their learning journey might think that avoidance and fear means you need a bigger, better reinforcer. And I think that can work against you and create more conflict and not really help anything. And it can be frustrating to you because you're like, why won't this, this isn't enough still. And I think really it comes back to the quote, and I think this is also Friedman. Someone listening will know where I think it was her that said, the worst time to fix a leaky roof is not during a rainstorm, or the best time is not going to be during the rainstorm. And I've thought about that so much lately with all of the different things that I'm working through with our different animals and with Cecil too. And I've tried to think, why is that? Because it's true. I believe that is true, but why? And I think the answer is that in those moments, like in the rainstorm moment, the deck is already stacked against you. Like all your antecedents are leading to not the outcome that you want in that moment. And I think that's why that the best time to work on something is not when there's a problem happening. I think that is the reason why. So yeah, I think that's carried over to work with the animals for sure. Thoughtful antecedent arrangement, and what can we change rather than adding in a different reinforcer or a bigger reinforcer? What about the environment can we adjust?
Oh, great. Thank you. Something else that you said that is kind of along these same lines too, that really stuck out to me was that you found where the answer was yes. You kind of gave up on that big picture idea you had of leaving. We're not going to leave tonight, even though you ended up getting there, but you gave up on that and you said, okay, where can I find where the answer is yes? And let's start building this reinforcement history, but with Cecil, this trust account with Cecil and Rachel, and kind of go from there for the future. So I thought that was a really impactful thing to say. And it reminds me of something another trainer I have heard Laura Monaco Torelli say before in regards to cooperative care / husbandry type training that there's no quick and dirty, right? And it sounds like that you kind of hoped for the quick exit that evening, but then realized, yeah, there is no quick and dirty here. I'm going to figure out where the point of yes is, and then we'll build from there at my learner's ability, or where my learner is from there. And I just love how you talked about your priority is not to invalidate Cecil's feelings. I see you smiling and nodding your head there. And that's such a big, important priority, I think, for all of us to have in our heads when we're working with others, that it's really important to make sure that we recognize the feelings of other individuals as valid. So I really appreciate you sharing that that's kind of your perspective with Cecil.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up Laura Monaco Torelli because I really admire her, first of all, but she might not even know it. I don't know. But she's influenced Cecil's life through her teachings with cooperative care training with animals. I've taken her examples of creativity and simulations at home and how, you don't need to have an exact, stethoscope in your toolkit at home. You can get some, just pick something that looks similar. And same with this. When Cecil broke his arm and we did simulations at home for the cast removal where they literally take a saw and they saw it off and he had just turned 2. We did lots of simulations and practice at home. We used a pizza cutter as our saw, and I just made noises with it and showed him videos on YouTube of cast removals being done. And then the other example, I wanted to mention something you said. I don't know what it was. That there's no quick and dirty. Some people could argue with that, I guess, and say, well, yeah, but we got it done, and that's definitely something that comes up a lot in the horse world. Just get it done. But it's like, at what cost? We could have run out the door and left when he was really, really, really upset. But what damage would that have done? And what is it going to look like next time when we even just mention Rachel's name or that she's coming over? And on that note, something that I'll always remember, that it was hard at the time to even process this concept, but I was actually out in California with Peggy Hogan at the place where she keeps her horses. And I did like a day of hands-on where I got to learn from her for a whole day. And I was going through Fionn, our pony with one eye, who we adopted from a rescue. And there's a very long list of things that need help with this pony. And I was going through all this with her, and I was just like, I can't even, touch him really right now. We can't, I can't pet him, like he's anxious around the food. Like I just was overwhelmed with things. And you kind of want to, I think parents do this too. Like we want to take a problem and kind of lump it with other problems and come up with like it's this label or something. And like, how do we address this big problem? And instead of what Peggy's response was make a list and start working, checking things off that list one by one. And in the moment that she said that, I was like, no way. Like, are you kidding? Like, oh man, like I know she's right, but I can't even, that is so overwhelming to me. But then she was right, of course. And then when I've had a close friend come to me with that same sense of overwhelm of like, my child is doing this and it's happening in this context and in this context. And could it just be that this is the problem? And, and my advice is like, well, okay, let's take a deep breath and let's look at one thing at a time. Like, let's pick one thing at a time and address that, and look at it. And so, yeah, back to there just isn't a quick and dirty as far as an outcome that won't work against us later.
So pick one thing at a time and start from a place of yes is kind of my takeaway from that. I love it. For our next question, I think as with the first question, I think we could keep chatting about this for some time, but we'll go ahead and move on to the next question. And I'm sure you have lots of things that you could share here. But if you would, maybe just pick one of the biggies here and share with us about a training situation that you are proud of.
Yeah. So for that question, like you said, there are a lot of things I maybe could say, but I feel like this one is important just because it's another good example of the overlap between the human and animal training or influencing of behavior. And that would be how I was able to approach what we'd call potty training. I don't even like calling it that. I liked calling it like learning how to use a toilet instead of like potty training. But how we approached that with Cecil when he was, he had just turned 2. He was like 2 years and 2 months old, I think, when I started taking notes and like collecting data. But I would say overall it was the aim was an errorless as much as possible and stress-free as much as possible approach to potty training. So not relying on any aversive outcomes to teach the skills that we wanted him to learn or blaming the learner. I'm really proud of how we did that and the outcome because it was so cool. I was so geeked about it. And it's the same concepts, but we have a little human instead of an animal. So yeah, I'm really proud of how we did that, and it involved teaching some precursor skills. So just being able to sit down on a little toilet and stand back up. So I have pictures where I had forgotten I even did this, where I put like his activity table in front of it so he could have something to like hold and, grab while he practiced standing up and sitting down. Out of context, I reinforced the learning how to do like his pants up and down by himself, and reinforce that. It was just like kind of basically tag teach, where I would give him, an example of what I wanted to see. And then I actually gave him an M&M a couple times for practicing that out of context. And then we were able to put it into context very quickly. And then I started by observing and taking data on the frequency that he would need to go so that I could make sure I was watching the clock and offering that opportunity right around the appropriate time, because it seemed very important to not nag and create a poison cue. And I can see how that would happen super easily with a parent that's trying to achieve this with their child. And, you might constantly ask, and I feel like that would get annoying and kind of get old fast. Like I wanted to preserve the cue basically. and not overdo it. So and then the last thing was having a reinforcer that I could deliver, because at that point you're working against a 2-year or more long reinforcement history of his body, like having that sensation and just going, in a diaper. And I think people miss that, like the cultural fog, you know what I mean? Kind of just has parents believe that this is a thing they need to learn, and it's a culturally appropriate skill, and you do it, and it doesn't matter how you do it, you just do it and get it done. And I just think there's a lot more we can do there. So the reinforcer that worked really well actually was Hershey Kisses. And that brought me back to conversations and things I've heard about animals that would choose a food puzzle over like just grabbing the food, and kind of like which option contains more reinforcement. And so he actually liked to open the wrapper and get the Hershey. He didn't want me to open it and hand it to him. He wanted the shiny Hershey Kiss, and he'd open it and eat it. So yeah, there's so many overlaps, but it went so well. He got it so fast, but we were really thoughtful with criteria. Like if a babysitter was coming over, it was a new person, I would make sure he was clear. Like, look, these are in the fridge. These Reese's peanut butter cups are in the fridge. So if you need to go potty, let the babysitter know, and she'll, and like what the cue was. I think the cue in the beginning is the visual, like of having the little toilet sitting out. And I think parents, you can run into trouble when all of a sudden you put it in the bathroom and now the cue's gone. And now they've got that long history of going when they need to, right? When they need to. And so what's the cue, And at one point I put little fun like signs up around the house as reminders so that he'd see a sign and like think, ooh, like I could go, so we don't want the environment to look exactly the same and be expecting a new behavior to magically appear. We need a cue they can perceive. So yeah, I was just so proud of how we went through all of that and put it all together, and being able to go from using the toilet at home to using toilets in public, and how that process evolved. And at every step, I was breaking it down and looking if there was a problem. I was like, okay, what's he concerned about? How do we change this to, again, find where the answer is yes. So that was something I was really proud of.
That's a good one. I can see why you were really proud of that for sure. Back to the thoughtful antecedent arrangements again, and some of those design skills, perhaps.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I love it. And definitely lots of overlap there with the same skills that are needed to teach a non-human learner how to go to the bathroom, how to potty where we want them to, So how long did it take you? You might have already said this and you may not remember, but do you remember how long it took you to teach Cecil that you wanted him to potty on the potty?
He caught on to that pretty quickly. It was pretty new when I was already leaving him with a sitter and saying he knows to do this. And, at this point it's every 3 hours. So if you can just ask, and so there wasn't a lot of accidents, I guess we'll call it. There wasn't a lot of there very early on, there was one time I think. And that was a stressful thing for him. So I didn't want to teach it through relying on that, if that makes any sense. But yeah, he caught on quickly. I wanted to add, there were setbacks sometimes where I was like, oh man, he's forgetting or holding it too long. And it seemed to me that it correlated with different stages of development is my guess. And if there was something new that he was really excited about or playing with, that would be, I think, a stronger cue than feeling that need to go. And so I think he would hold it like way too long, and then you have like a teeny tiny accident. And so like I would adjust, I never held the criteria in a linear fashion, if that makes sense. Like I was always looking at what he was able to do and then adjusting the criteria to help him be successful. And coming back to the errorless learning thing. So not learner blaming. And so, yeah, if I notice like, okay, he's not making it there early enough lately. So what's going on? I would go back to, okay, let's add in, some other options for a reinforcer, and like, let me be conscious of it and remind and like ask him if he needs to go, and a huge thing that I thought was so cool was how quickly we were able to let the real life or the functional reinforcers take the place of the contrived or the edible reinforcers that we were giving him. So it really quickly evolved overall into, I could say, with a transition, like, hey, let's go do a potty and then we'll go play outside. And like, let's go do a potty and then we'll go have our snack, or, something like that. And I was like, oh, like if you have, a history now of what you want, and then part of the reinforcement is the elimination itself, and then going to do the next fun thing. I thought that was so cool to see.
That is a wonderful example. I can see why you're proud of it for sure. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. I know that lots of people are going to identify with that process in one way or another. And hopefully, I would imagine there are some folks out there that can learn some things from what you just shared that will help them in their process of teaching a learner where they would like them to potty.
Yes.
I'm not sure what words to use here, but we'll just stick with potty.
Yes.
I feel like I could also keep chatting about this with you, but it looks like we are really right about at time here. And so before we go, I want to give you the opportunity to just kind of briefly share with everybody. You have a new project. You mentioned it in your bio. It's a joint project between you and Laura Perkins Animal Behavior, I believe. Did I get that right? Okay,
yeah,
great.
Yeah.
Sips of Science. Could you tell everybody what Sips of Science is, what you all are hoping to do with that project, and how folks can check it out if they're interested, which I'm sure they will be?
Yeah, Laura Perkins is actually another ATA member as well, and has become a very close friend and colleague. And we basically had an idea a while back for creating content related to training that we could potentially make accessible to clients or other people who influence behavior who want to learn, but in a way that might break it down for them and make it more accessible. I think we all, as trainers, or anyone in the behavior field, I think we get really used to the lingo and the definitions and the terminology. And I think sometimes it's hard for clients to grasp some of that. And so our goal was to start small and kind of bring them along through, okay, what does setting up for success mean? I think we forget, we say that, or we say like, find where the answer is yes. And I've even had a friend say like, what do you mean? Like, what does that mean? And so I think it's just a kind of a way to kind of get the information out there to whoever is interested, and try to build on it and help people learn. And yeah, we did start out with the videos, and then decided through how that was going and through some feedback that a short podcast, maybe once a month, might be something we'll try next.
Great. And I did catch both of your videos. I was able to catch up on those and watch them last week, and I really enjoyed them. And I do think that's a really important thing that you all are trying to do. I know we do get it's important for us to understand the scientific language. It's important for us to be able to understand a different language that people in the animal training world use, although sometimes we don't always even mean the same thing necessarily. But I remember when I was first starting to learn about clicker training, and I would read it right along with the definitions about, what a marker signal was and what a bridge was. And, I would see these terms with the definition, and it's so easy for me to forget sometimes now when communicating with others how long it took for that to really sink in, So I definitely think what you all are trying to do to break things down to make it more accessible to more people is really important. So for folks who want to maybe see the existing videos that you all have up and then catch the podcast in the future, could you tell us how they'll be able to do that, if there's a website or something? And then also, after that, if you don't mind maybe sharing, if people wanted to reach out to you, how could they do that? And maybe telling us how they can find out more about your business, Contingent on Kindness.
Yeah. So most of the content, all of the content will be available through our social media platforms. So for me on Facebook, the page is called Sara Crockett Contingent on Kindness Behavior Consulting. And on Instagram, it is called Contingent on Kindness. And then Laura, too, is Laura Perkins Animal Behavior. So you can find it on her Instagram and Facebook. And then we do have a website. We were able to get sipsofscience.com. So we have the content up there right now. And then my email address is Sara Crockett, ckbc@gmail.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Sara, for sharing all of that. And also, before I forget again, because I had already forgotten once, but thank you for mentioning that Laura Perkins is also an amazing member of the Animal Training Academy. We're very lucky to have her in the community there with all of us as well. So thanks for mentioning that. I had meant to, and I forgot to do that. But Sara, thank you so much for sharing everything today. It's been just a real pleasure for me, and I'm sure that our listeners are going to enjoy everything that they've heard today and possibly have a bunch of questions and even reach out to you with those questions maybe. But thank you for taking the time to share with all of us today.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
We do, of course, appreciate all of you tuning in as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and are interested in carrying on the conversation about working with the animals in our lives in the most positive, most fun, and most choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.atamember.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behavior geeks. That's it for this episode, though. Thank you so much for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.